Let's prepare ourselves to win sovereignty and peace in any circumstance that may arise in the days, months, and years to come.
The Trump administration announced it would use all its power against the Nicolas Maduro regime in Venezuela. This announcement was made today during that ceremony that happens almost every day by the White House spokesperson, Caroline Levi.
Regarding Venezuela, President Trump has been clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice. The Maduro regime is not Venezuela's legitimate government. This administration views it as a narco-terror cartel and Maduro as an illegitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country.
In the international arena, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, announced the mobilization of 4.5 million militiamen in response to what he called threats from the United States.
Of the whole peace plan, what am I going to say? Deploy all militia capacity in the territory and by sectors. Establish the capacity of the Bolivarian National Militia.
Maduro has just called 4.5 million people to take up arms. That is equivalent to arming the entire population of Uruguay in a single day. But
in this fight, I would even give my life. There's a
war in Venezuela. Here we go on stage. It's only ever been about being a soldier.
this call didn't happen by chance. It was a calculated response. Because when a superpower offers $50 million for the head of a sitting president, and that president responds by mobilizing a people's army bigger than the armed forces of entire countries, something serious is about to happen. To understand what's really at stake here, we need to go back exactly 1 week ago, on August 7th. The United States made an unprecedented decision. They increased the reward for the capture of Nicolas Maduro from 15 to a staggering $50 million. To give you an idea of what this means, that's twice the reward they offered for Osama bin Laden after September 11th. But this isn't just about money. It's a declaration of war. A war.
Psychological.
It is.
It's as if America were saying, this man is no longer a head of state. He's a wanted criminal. And when you strip someone of their status as president, you also take away their diplomatic immunity. In other words, it paves the way for any kind of military action. The American Attorney General, Pamela Bondi, didn't hold back on the details when she announced the results of the operation a few days later. At a press conference that looked more like the end of an operation against the
mafia sheep,
revealed that they had already seized more than $700 million in assets linked to the Venezuelan president. The list is impressive. 2 private jets, 9 luxury vehicles, mansions in Florida and the Dominican Republic, a horse ranch, and millions in jewelry. But do you want to know what's even more disturbing? They intercepted 30 tons of cocaine, and part of that substance was mixed with fentanyl, the opioid that kills more than 70,000 Americans every year. As you can see, the United States doesn't just see Maduro as an authoritarian president. They see him as the supreme leader of the Cartel of the Suns. That name is a reference to the golden insignias of Venezuelan generals. For the American government, the Venezuelan state itself has turned into a criminal organization. And the accusations are specific: conspiracy for drug trafficking, importation of cocaine into American territory.
Important in the international cocaine trafficking scheme through air and sea routes. Drug traffickers started using Venezuelan ports to send the drugs to Europe. Large cocaine shipments also depart from the neighboring country to Central America. There, the drugs are received by Mexican cartels such as the Sinaloa cartel, who resell them in the United States.
And the use of military-grade weapons to facilitate drug trafficking. And with this extensive list, things change a lot in legal terms. That's because when a head of state is formally accused of terrorism and drug trafficking, he loses traditional diplomatic immunity. The international rules that protect sitting presidents do not apply to leaders of terrorist organizations. It's a legal strategy that turns the Venezuelan regime from a political government into a transnational criminal enterprise. And this classification sets a precedent for actions that would have been unthinkable until now. But Nicolas Maduro knows this game very well. He studied the history of Cuba, North Korea, and all the regimes that have opposed the United States for decades. And, initially, was his first reaction exactly what you would expect from someone under direct threat? When he found out that the United States had intensified military operations in the region, moving drones and aircraft to bases in Puerto Rico, Panama, Colombia, the Bahamas, and the Antilles, Maduro disappeared. He was moved to a maximum security bunker in Caracas. The man, who always appeared in public, simply vanished. But here he is. What no one expected. That wasn't his final answer. After a few days analyzing the situation, after seeing the reward jump to $50 million, after feeling the American military pressure intensifying, Maduro made a decision that surprised even his closest advisors. Instead of continuing to hide, instead of trying to negotiate behind the scenes, he did exactly the opposite. He left the bunker, appeared on national television, and turned a personal threat into a national threat. He called on millions of Venezuelan civilians to take up arms, not as soldiers, but as militiamen, not to attack, but to defend. The strategy is simple. Nationalize the conflict. Now it's no longer the United States against Nicolas Maduro hiding in a bunker. It's the United States against the armed Venezuelan people in the streets. If the American government wants to take military action, it won't be a surgical operation against a cornered leader. It will be a large-scale invasion against millions of civilians willing to fight. And here's the problem. This isn't the first time this has happened in Venezuela. This story began in April 2002 when generals tried to overthrow Hugo Chavez in a lightning military coup. For 48 hours, Chavez disappeared. At that time, the American recognition of the interim government marked the beginning of a hostility that persists to this day. Why did Chavez end up coming back?
A coup d'etat in Venezuela? Dreams of some desperate person? But there is a solid reality in the civil-military union and an armed force willing to defend this constitution and the process that is legitimately driven by the revolutionary government.
And when he came back, he learned a lesson he would never forget. He couldn't fully trust the traditional army. Generals have their own ambitions. Soldiers may hesitate when it comes to shooting their own people. But a civilian militia with its own ideology and motivation, well, that fight goes until the end. The Bolivarian National Militia was officially founded in 2008, but its spirit was born during those 48 hours in April. And with that, Chavez created the concept of civic-military union, mixing armed civilians with professional soldiers to build a network reaching every neighborhood, factory, and rural community. Officially, they are reservists of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces. In practice, they are the eyes and ears of the regime. They are the first line of defense against coups. They are the last line of resistance against foreign invasions. And if we believe the official numbers, well, they're impressive. From 500,000 members in 2010, they've jumped to 5 million today. For reference, the Brazilian army in a neighboring country has 200,000 active soldiers. The Venezuelan militia, in turn, even with half of the official numbers, would still be larger than most South American armies. But many Venezuelans doubt these numbers. There's even a joke they tell on the streets of Caracas. Some call the force the Mil Ancianos, a reference to the advanced age of many of its members. But even if that number is lower and only a third of that, we're still talking about more than 1 million armed and ideologically aligned people. And this militia isn't just for national defense. It also serves to control the people, but in a much more sophisticated way. Want some examples? During the 2014 protests, they were the ones who dismantled the opposition's barricades. In 2019, they blocked the entry of humanitarian aid at the border with Colombia. They also control the distribution of basic food supplies, creating a dependency of the population on the regime. In other words, whenever the regime needs muscle on the streets, the militia shows up. But something deeper is happening. Maduro turned his greatest weakness into his greatest strength. He knows he can't compete militarily with the United States. Stop and think. 3 American destroyers and 4,000 Marines arrived in the Caribbean. That's more firepower than the entire Venezuelan armed forces combined. A conventional war between the United States and Venezuela would be over in a few hours. And the result, well, would be predictable. Maduro knows he doesn't stand a chance. And that's why he's not preparing for a conventional war. He's preparing for a prolonged and bloody people's war, the kind of war the Americans faced in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Now the American government faces a terrible dilemma. That's because an operation like this, even if limited, can turn into a prolonged occupation against millions of urban guerrillas. Imagine the headlines: United States invades Latin American country, thousands of civilians killed, millions of refugees. The political cost would be devastating. The economic cost would be astronomical. Maduro knows that. His strategists have studied every American war of the last 50 years. They know the difficulties that prolonged wars cause for everyone involved. This strategy even has a name, the Cuban model. That's because Cuba survived for 60 years, facing the United States using the same formula: strong security apparatus, mobilized population, and support from rival powers. Venezuela is basically copying this playbook. The call by Maduro to mobilize 4.5 million militiamen is exactly that. To put the Cuban model into practice, he is trying to turn a threat against himself personally into a threat against the entire Venezuelan people. But while Maduro mobilizes militiamen, 30 tons of cocaine were intercepted. While he talks about national defense, 700 million in assets were seized. And meanwhile, 20 million Venezuelans live in poverty, 8 million have fled the country, and his opponents are persecuted. Given this explosive scenario, 3 possible paths open up for Venezuela. The first pointed out by analysts as the most likely. This deadlock drags on for years. The people keep suffering, but nothing gets resolved. As happened with Cuba, Maduro stays in power with Chinese and Russian support, while the economy gradually deteriorates. The second is that internal pressure could crack the regime. Generals may decide that Maduro has become a problem. Here, the Chavista military leadership itself may decide to remove him from power to save their own skins. It would be an internal coup. Not from the opposition, but from his own allies, who no longer want to be internationally wanted criminals. And third, and this is the most dangerous, some accidental event could trigger a conflict that no one really wants. As you can see, this presence of American ships in the Caribbean, along with millions of mobilized militiamen, creates a very dangerous situation. Any miscalculation could have devastating consequences. Now I want to know your opinion. What do you think is going to happen? Do you believe the United States will actually take military action, or will they stick to just economic and diplomatic pressure? Leave your opinion in the comments. If you want to better understand these international crises that affect the whole region, subscribe to the channel and share this video. The more people know what's really happening, the better. Thanks for watching. See you next video.